Hi, this is Steve Hargadon, and welcome to Stephen Abram, our distinguished. Thanks to our sponsors and supporters, most especially for Collaborate. This is your chance to let us know where you're listening from. Look for the star to the left of the map. Click on it. Probably have to click twice and then click on the map, and then feel free in the chat to shout out where you're participating from.
Somebody's on a plane.
Somebody's on a plane. Very fun. We'll let you keep putting that in the chat while we move forward. Wherever you are participating from, or if you're listening to the recording, we sure appreciate your being a part of this. Stephen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Steve. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Good evening for some of you. I really enjoyed this Web 2.012 after last year's 2.011 Woodstock for Librarians, I called it, because we managed to have so many people from around the world and in this wonderful San Jose State University SLIS free training and knowledge sharing. I think it's an amazing thing for a library school to do on such an amazing scale. When I proposed my session this year, I wanted to talk about post-Web 2.0 strategies, because I think that's something that's under-discussed right now, that we're in a world where the technology is sort of normal now. Yeah, we've got a few people, even a couple of librarians who haven't ever been in Facebook or don't know what Twitter is or haven't watched a YouTube. There's always a few. But just looking at the Pew data and surveys we've done around the world, all this stuff is pretty normal now. And what it really means is we have to get back to what librarians are really about and get back into actually real strategic planning rather than the strategic foundational planning of adopting these technologies. And I think that's a really, really important point. And when I do little workshops and ask people to describe their library, so I'm asking you now to think in your head, how would you describe your library? And so just let it rattle around. And what I find is people describe what's there. They don't describe what's happening. And strategy, strategic planning, and the priorities we set are for what's going to happen, not what's there. If you describe your collection, your buildings, DVDs, physical objects, those are a bunch of nouns that describe your libraries. But really what's happening is what happens with the people. So can you describe your library in terms of what's the impact of an answer? What's the impact of answering a question? What's the impact of attending a program? And what's the impact of learning something? And that sort of stuff, just the impact of discovery. What are the verbs in your library, and can you describe your library as verbs? And I think that's an important, very important distinction. Strategy is about verbs, not nouns. The nouns are the foundations. Yes, we have to have collections. Yes, we have to have technology. Yes, we have to have buildings and presences on the web. But that's not what's really happening. What's really happening is with people. So when I think about that, I think about what's the change that's happening in library and how is change happening in the things that we do. So if we say our library supports discovery, what is it we actually do? What is it in our strategy that you can point to in a strategic intent statement in your strategic plan that says we have a one-on-one client management relationship with every PhD student and faculty member and lab researcher on their discovery knowledge, and we have that CRM system that tells us what they're discovering, and that we have targeted them as a key object, a key thing that is the output of our university or college or R&D lab. When you sit there and say, we have a strategy to improve learning in our community, what are the courses we offer and how do the people do in those courses? If we have a course on how to find a job, did they find a job? What is the impact? And so those changes are things we've always done, but it's no longer sufficient to talk about that stuff in the way that we assumed it as motherhood and apple pie, because people just knew that the library helped them. The threat against libraries right now are people who think that we're just about books and warehousing the objects we have, the shallow thinkers. And this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to do a great thing. As we move into the information and knowledge-based economy where continuous learning, continuous lifetime learning happens, what is the role of libraries in supporting that? And if we were to disappear, what would happen to damage society? In a financially driven society, MBAs and CPAs did quite well. In an industrial economy, scientists and engineers did quite well. In an information and knowledge-based economy, information professionals, as those represented by computer engineers, librarians, teachers, the people who deal in knowledge, those are the things that we need to start looking at, and what are the strategies we do. And we're at the point where the internet was the transformational change. Much like the printing press changed society, the internet now has changed society. Obviously that's a cliche, except that people think it's here. Excuse me. And when we look at that, we need to understand that the internet's at its infancy. We've been through a period of very, very slow change. Not much has happened. Not the transformational change we saw in the Renaissance, not the transformational change we saw with the invention of the printing press, not the transformational change we saw when we went into the new economy at the time of the Depression and the Great Wars. We are now looking at a fundamental transformational change, and the amount of change we're going to get over the next few years is huge. Those libraries that haven't risen to the challenge of just building the infrastructure they need to be successful for the last 10, 15 years, getting their Facebook stuff up, getting their social presence, getting their internet, getting their stuff online, those are the ones who are going to have even bigger problems. The ones who have the foundation are ready to move to the next step. And so as we look at this, what does it mean when we start thinking about books? And yeah, we love books. God knows I love books. I think it's an amazing thing. It stores human knowledge. But libraries are about reading, discovery, learning, and books are just one of the objects that do that. And for those who protect the book instead of protecting reading, it's a challenge for us. And yes, there are some skirmishes and some battles on the book front, but there's also some real challenges for us in understanding what the threats to reading are. And that, I think, is worthy of a much bigger discussion. Just making your library electronic isn't enough. Often what I'm seeing is people believe the people they're seeing in person in the library represent the average user, which of course they don't. The studies on the virtual user versus the in-house user of a library show that they share almost no demographic similarities. They have different levels of computer skills. The virtual user is higher. The virtual user often comes from a different demographic on income, on race, on location in the community. There are just serious differences. And those libraries that haven't studied the broad base of their user and haven't segmented their virtual user from their in-person user are putting themselves at risk. I go into libraries where they believe the user has serious issues with searching and serious issues with some of these things, and yet they remain in denial that a significant proportion of their use is coming in virtually, that people are using the databases and it's invisible to them, that there are strategies that can increase database use online by hundreds and even thousands of percent that they aren't adopting as they worry that people are coming in differently. And the library's mandate around learning in public libraries as the People's University, in K-12 libraries and the homework helper aspects, in the academic sphere, looking at what it means when every student is a distant student if they're not in front of you, and what is being learned in distance education that needs to be understood. And that fits in, since education is a social act, being part of a classroom cohort, working with others, learning from others. Those are social acts. And the social technologies represented by the 2.0 kind of web stuff, or at least discussed under that umbrella, are huge opportunities for us. And those of us who, those systems that either narrow it down to one person's responsibility to be in charge of the Facebook account or one person to populate a Twitter feed, are missing the opportunity to engage in the learning aspects of their communities. And that's dangerous for the institution in the extreme. So how must library strategies change with this shift that we're starting to see happening? So I'm going to put my conclusions up front because I never get through all my slides, actually. But one is to prioritize programs, not collections. And when you look at collection development, have you built the chart that says, we have a collection of cookbooks? What does your cooking program stuff look like? How many cookbook authors do you have in? What does the kitchen in your public library look like? What does your chef's course relationship with your cookbook collection look like in your community college? Any collection should have a program attached to it, because that's the interface, the magic that happens between collections and people, rather than merely relying on serendipity for an end user to individually find something in the collection. It needs to move up to a higher level. We also need to drive reference, our research support system, the answers we give, with data. And I'm going to talk a little bit about your top questions. I'm always surprised the number of librarians and libraries that in their strategic planning don't know what their top questions are. If your top question is, and I heard from one library, their top question is, how do I load ebooks onto my tablet or my e-reader? That's what's the program look like that goes with that. And a lot of libraries have some amazing programs just to bring your own device and show them how to use it. If your top question is, how do I find a job? What does your program look like? And I'm not talking about a program that's an event that sits there and says, okay, on Thursday night, every Thursday night we have this. But what is the suite of programs? What's the scaffolding of it? What's the layering of it that says, okay, we have drop-in groups for job seekers. We have how to find a job sessions. We have databases of jobs and ways of doing things and portals to do that. And what we're seeing is too many libraries are not looking at reference as the data, the information that drives what programs they should be doing. The strategy needs to balance the physical and the virtual. Virtually every library, the majority, in fact most of them, the vast majority of the moments of truth, the interactions with their end users, with their members, with their students, is happening virtually. And the physical is the complement to building on the virtual presence. So that upending, that turnover in how the world of libraries needs to be recognized and understood and looked at from the data point of view to figure out, what do we use our physical space for? We have wonderful physical spaces. How do we make sure the programs and collections in those physical spaces and the services in those physical spaces actually match what's happening virtually and physically? We need to invest time in demographics and analytics. Both in Canada and the US, we've got some fairly recent census data. We need to look at what that implies or means for our services. And then we need to look at the analytics. We can look at where people are coming from in our community. Many libraries have been gobsmacked by finding out that the people they thought were their major users are not, and that they found that the communities using the library the most were not the communities that they were seeing face-to-face. And that's an interesting thing you can do with Google Maps and Google Analytics, and looking at your circulation data and who's borrowing and who's visiting your website. And by doing that, you can sit there and say, oh, well, we've got a very different place. And it's the concept of homophily that people are more comfortable talking to people who are similar to them. And libraries tend to be a very narrow demographic range of people, and we do not connect as well with the broadest range of most communities that we support. There are age and generational differences between us and our major users. There are definitely some diversity issues within our profession, and we represent a fairly narrow middle-class band of people. And that means that we are not as connected to the groups that are potential users of the library as we might like. We need to build recreational reading away from individual effort and get real about the ebook issue. And I don't want to make this an ebook session. I'm sure there's plenty on this web conference. But when you look at things like Library Thing for Libraries, BiblioCommons, the Library Psychic initiative that just started at Portland, Maine Public Library, being able to build the communities of interest around the library collection and within the bounds of a physical community creates the social glue that might be necessary to sustain the library and its presence in the community in a virtual way. Homework, there's certainly a challenge. I know that I say this often, but the number of librarians who say if the teachers would just call us when they assigned a major assignment, we'd be able to deal with the kids when they came in. Well, the curriculum has been out there on the web for years. You should know what's coming at you at what time of year. It's not a surprise that the Shakespeare questions come in October and November. That's where it's taught nationwide, right across the entire U.S., in particular and in Canada as well. It's not a rocket science to learn what the outcome-based strategies of 21st century learning in the States, the Common Core, the trends that have happened in education, especially in Canada and the U.S., around how homework is showing up in the place. If you expect the teachers to call you when they assign an assignment, you know, the average public library branch in particular has maybe 1 or 2 dozen schools around every branch with dozens of teachers in each school and 6 or 7 classes per day in every classroom. That looks at, you know, thousands of questions a month. You can't handle people telling you when there's assignments, but understanding the curriculum. So are librarians actually looking at homework? Are they bringing in the grade 9 history teacher to tell them what the grade 9 curriculum is? Or are you investing a year in understanding grade 9, then grade 10, then grade 11, then grade 12, and what the outcomes are, so that you're aware of what's happening? Because the school system absolutely does not resemble the school system that you went through. So using your own knowledge is absolutely the wrong place to start. And this upending of outcome-based education and the 21st century learning initiatives and the Common Core create a framework for understanding how homework is happening. And it's similar to the opportunities within transliteracy, information literacy, and knowing how to train people. Too many libraries don't understand the Google business model, that the end user is not the customer of Google or Bing. The end user is the product that is sold to the commercial interests. This is the perfect year to watch it as we see massive search engine optimization and content, it's called content spam, but contract content being put on the web to manipulate at a geotagged level what's happening. Of course, every university librarian on this call should understand that I or any company can buy a geotag set of all the college and university geography sites in the US and Canada, and I can search engine optimize and push content just to the university site. That's because university students are a key market. They haven't for advertisers. That's the kind of stuff that people need to understand. And then partnerships and how we work with others, that if we web ourselves through our community with, you know, it's been traditional for universities to work with hospitals or for law libraries at a law school to work with the major firms in town on articling student boot camps, or public libraries to work with the gardening center and do the spring sidewalk sale of things. There's all sorts of programs, and that very much moves the place forward. So we have some specific challenges within libraries, and this is the strategic issue for us. One is setting priorities. Part of it's understanding that if we've got 100 things we'd like to do, and we choose 3, 4, 5 to do in 6 to 12 months, it's understanding that sacrificing the other 95 things temporarily is very difficult for most of our staff, and how do we deal with focusing priorities and making those choices. We, as social service professionals and as people who care about the end user to the extreme, and that's a good thing, making those sacrifices is very, very difficult for us. We also have an unusual innovation culture. Innovation usually happens, it reaches a certain point, and then it's a matter of how do we get our pilots to diffuse through the system? How do we get it to open up? So if somebody makes a brilliant LibGuide for a specific course, why is it not at the level of catalog cards, the OCLC catalog card system? Why can we collaborate on OCLC and not on LibGuides? Why are we hand knitting and handcrafting something as transformational as a LibGuide or a portal or a website? Why are those having so much issue diffusing through all libraries? And how do we move ourselves up to another level? Choosing to put certain programs on hiatuses, or to say those programs will continue, but we're not going to invest staff time in improving them right now. We're going to say, gee, they're really good, now let's invest the staff time in something else. So if we're really, really good at storytelling hour in public libraries, investing more and more time in that, rather than saying, gee, we've got an audience for parenting courses, or we have an audience for caregivers who are daycare workers, what should our program look like for that, and how do we make some of those programs more multidimensional to improve our communities? We know that libraries have too much staff in the back room doing things. We have some libraries all backing up and running all their own servers rather than going to the cloud and using software as a service, and repositioning strategically those staff who have the technology skills to actually work harder on building experience portals and websites and the stuff that we need. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold and it's driving me crazy. And then how do we move more people into the front room? We've seen some of that with RFID and self-checkout, picking up your own holds, but we need to look at how do we take the talented staff we have, reduce the amount of labor-intensive, not quite clerical stuff, and move it into relationship management stuff. And how do we build programs that work? How do we make sure we're aligned with our goals? How do we make sure we're measuring the right stuff? Libraries have gotten really good at counting things and keeping statistics, but really don't get to the point of looking at impact measures, looking at how do we sample something, how do we sample a program, how do we sample a month, and how do we look at, did it make a difference in our community, did it make a difference to learning, discovery, community glue, whatever. How do we look at our organizational structures? Are we over-governed? Are we doing too many things not collaboratively? And there's certainly some major initiatives around library renewal, Digital Public Library of America, sorry, and a number of those. I might even have a slide on that later, but I certainly look at that and think that there are opportunities for cooperation in our consortia and moving them from buying clubs into statewide, nationwide, global governance structures. We certainly have models that have worked, like OCLC as a global governance structure for catalog records, and we could do the same thing with other areas. And then we need to invest more in HR development. I think we're really investing heavily in technology training, But our issue in this generational shift that's approaching us, a lot of people say, oh, it's not going to happen. I'm going, well, you know, I don't see people finishing aging. And all the people my age and up are eventually going to age out of the system. And until we start to invest more in organization development, change management training, leadership training, vision, mission, budgeting, advocacy, the soft skills development, instead of the low-hanging fruit of technology development, we're going to be in trouble. And so in libraries, we need to look at that the issues that affect the social web, the things that Web 2.0 is putting a focus on, is things like advocacy, things like running a political campaign for getting a fee increase or a tax increase for the library, things like making sure that people understand what's going on or understand the programs. And we have a few sacred cows, too many desks, some types of books. As we look at reference books moving online and becoming different creatures, I certainly know that within my own organization, we have rebuilt the reference book through the Gale Virtual Reference Library to be quite a different animal with a number of different tools on it that allow it to be a different kind of book or to create books on the fly from a number of books at once. And those challenge the very concept of a book. And then, of course, we need to get better at promotion, marketing, communication, and advocacy. We seem to like telling people things, and we're not as good at engagement, or we overemphasize certain things, and that's some of the stuff. So this change that's about to hit us is going to happen very fast. We've been through a period of very slow change, and now we're moving into a period of very, very fast change. And society needs more sense makers. And how do you improve the quality of questions, which is what librarians do? And improving the quality of questions is quite different than just providing answers or providing good and decent service. It's a professional task on the level of consulting or any other professional. And to reduce confusion amongst end users requires some pretty fine skills that most of us have. And certainly some reference librarians exemplify some brilliant work, but they often don't describe what they do effectively to say this is the impact I have and this is why I'm a professional doing it. And so it looks at what's an experience. What's the experience of working with a library to achieve an end user goal from the end user in? What differentiates a library experience from a transaction, and what is a library experience? And if you wrote a strategic plan purely describing the experiences you are going to get in that library versus operationally considering how are we going to organize around circulation, technology, and acquisitions, it would be a very, very different thing. And people will fund positive transformational experiences more than they will fund expensive operational items, even though the operational items need to be funded to deliver the experience. And what differentiates libraries from Google or Bing? Which is, you know, we all get that question. And it's quite obvious what the differences are, but we don't necessarily communicate it as effectively we want. And we need to look at the evolution of answers and what's happening in the answer space. Can you describe why people ask questions? And then, is your library organized around questions? Or is it organized around technology and buildings and collections? So if you organized around answers and programs and the groups of questions you get and the on-demand questions you get, what would your strategic plan look like? And what would that look like around virtual reference strategies, or around how do I train someone to ask better questions? What would a good program look like around citations? And then, if my community had an issue with the environment, if I'm in the Southwest where water shortages are an issue, what can the library do that meets a community need in that space? And here's just a list that I've got out of a bunch of workshops we've done. And it's looking at, you know, who, what, where, when questions that Google and Bing do well versus the how and why questions that libraries excel at. And looking at when we have data and information in our libraries and our end users, our members, are trying to become more knowledgeable, what are the behaviors we want at the other end? We're certainly not trying to create wisdom, but we are trying to create positive behaviors. Are they making good decisions? Are they making good choices? Are they understanding the healthcare situation that they have? And then how do we understand how to support question strategies as opposed to information strategies? Questions, questioning is a verb. Information is a noun. And are we focusing on how we focus on informing versus how we focus on managing information? And strategically, I believe we should be focusing on informing and questioning. So what are your top 20 questions, and what's the service portfolio that goes with those? Here's from one library system I surveyed, the top 14 questions they got. Yours could differ quite a lot, but I can show you the questionnaire we used, and you can do your own questions and say, okay, well, gee, if health and wellness is our #1 question, what does our program look like? How many programs a year do we offer in that? What does our collection look like? How new is our collection? I once read a statistic that any book older than 7 years old on health and wellness was out of date and was dangerous on the shelf. And that's certainly true on things like the more common diseases, transplants, the amount of knowledge that's been created over the last few years on just simple things like arthritis and rheumatism and muscular dystrophy has gotten quite a lot. So is your health and wellness collection up to date? And what's the programs that you've put on top of it? Excuse me, I'm just going to get another drink there. If you have hobbies in your collection, what are your top hobbies? When I surveyed this, I found out that librarian hobbies mapped 1-for-1 with patron hobbies, which I thought was fascinating. But what are your programs around hobbies in a public library? And, you know, Seth Godin talks about what's stopping us from doing this. What stops you from meeting your strategic intent? And, you know, what's getting in the way? You don't know what to do? Well, I think it's pretty straightforward. You just sit down and discuss it. You sit there and say, okay, what are our top questions? What do we want to do? What do we want to have an impact on? And then how do we do it? You don't know how to do it? Well, that's simple stuff. You've got professionals in your library. They've got us. That's something we should know how to do. You don't have the authority or the resources to do it? That's usually a priority, budgeting priority decision, saying, do we really need to be doing X or Y? Should we be building a CD and DVD collection when that format is going away? And should we be spending our money learning how to handle streaming media? Those sorts of questions. Some of us fear what's happening. We fear making a mistake, although my call on it is that when I have these discussions with our colleagues, is I find that librarians fear success more than they fear failure. Oh my God, what if our patrons doubled? We don't have the staff to handle that sort of stuff. And it's an interesting problem to have. Or you believe that money matters most rather than prioritizing how you spend your money. Once you figure out what's getting in the way, it's far easier to find an answer. You can work around it, over it, under it. Stuck is a state of mind, and it's curable. It shouldn't take years to decide what to do. There are a number of strategic planning, and I have a number of friends who are involved in strategic planning for libraries, where they can fast-track strategic plans and then fast-track the employee, library employee engagement in the strategic plan to move forward in 3 to 6 months, rather than it taking 5 years to do a strategic planning exercise. Because libraries are really about community, learning, discovery, making progress, applied and theoretical research, cultural and knowledge custody, and economic impact. I try to put up on my blog, Stephen's Lighthouse, as many economic impact studies as I can find about what the library does and how it applies, because I think we need to start talking about the role we play in the economy rather than letting people assume that we're old-fashioned. And our strategies are to answer questions, train and educate people, align with curriculum standards, and improve the performance of students. And we know from a couple of studies that, public libraries partner with school libraries, we get a 5-point increase in standardized testing scores. If schools have a properly maintained school library, they get a 15, 20, 25-point increase in standardized testing scores. We align with the research agenda in a university or an R&D lab, and we improve the community from a social and an economic point of view. I did a study a few years ago that said that the end users value the library not for the books, not for the CERC, not for the free aspects of it. They value the library for its role in the community and for its role in learning. And what are librarians for? Librarians are experts. We're there for our expertise. We're there for relationships and making sure we understand those relationships. That's what things like Facebook do, is they make those relationships clearer. Who am I related to? Everything, like I've organized my Facebook page into family members, friends, SLA members, colleagues at work, colleagues at previous workplaces, librarians who I follow or listen to because I value their opinions. And it lets me manage relationships with people. What does your Facebook presence look like in that space, in the Web 2.0 opportunity? Libraries are for transforming people, not for transactions. Transformational, after you've worked with a librarian, you should be materially different as an end user, as a student, as a faculty member. And it's for professional service, not being a good and trusted information or polite information servant. And we provide vision in how this moves forward. We're seeing the aspects of our vision, maybe not as clearly articulated as we want, in this ebook debacle on fiction. Obviously, it's not as big a deal in the nonfiction space. Gale has been providing our nonfiction books for unlimited simultaneous usage for many years. I worry that so many librarians are hanging their hat on 5 or 6 fiction publishers and not using the opportunity of pointing to successful publishers that have been licensing ebooks to libraries under a decent model for years. And we provide leadership in through our associations or through some of these new organizations like the Digital Public Library of America or Library Renewal or the new Public Advocacy PAC, the Public Advocacy Committee that is being created by John Kraska. So the questions for libraries today are our priorities right? Are learning, research, and discovery changing materially, and what is actually changing, and what does the Web 2.0, as an umbrella term, although I think it's moving into normal, what does that opportunity provide for us? And what is the foundation of future library success? Books? I don't think it's such the biggest deal. What I want to look at is what are the foundations of what we need to do? Should libraries be collectors of e-learning? Should they be more program institutions? Should we change the dynamics of how we're representing ourselves to the world? Yes, we know libraries have books. I'm always amazed at the number of logos of libraries that have books in them, or they tell everybody they have books on their webpage. If you've got people in your community who don't know libraries have books, you've got a bigger problem. What we have a problem with is that libraries don't understand the strategic impact of libraries on their lives and how libraries transform lives. So what's the role of librarians in the real future that's not just an extension of the past, but one we create? The best way to predict the future is to invent it yourselves. And what's the path forward? Is it on the old technologies or is it on the new technologies? We have to be careful not to create our libraries of great grocery stores of information that are difficult to find stuff on shelves, organized by, okay, the stuff on shelves, we have to keep the perishable stuff in fridges here, and the newspapers over here because they're different format, and the maps over there. We have, the way it would be in a grocery store. We're cookbooks authors. We're chefs. We manage the relationship between the information and the end user. That's where the transformational magic happens, and that's where we can make a big difference. And so if we're going to be rock star chefs, we need to look at food TV and see who are these people who've done this stuff and made, chefs famous, named famous people, and ask ourselves, why are there so few publicly famous librarians in a world that's information-based. You know, yes, we have Nancy Pearl, who is awesome, and she's got, you know, her NPR stuff and does the boat cruises and writes her books, and they're just amazing. But we need more librarians out there representing ourselves as local celebrities, or I hope global international celebrities, because the end user wants a meal. The end user doesn't want a grocery store experience. The end user may enjoy looking at the odd cookbook, but what they really want is their goal is the meal. So what is the meal in end user terms? What's the difference in books versus reading and the reading experience? What's the difference between going to the library in an academic setting and lesson level interventions on here's the information you need for this lesson and extended learning? Here's what fits in with this chapter of this textbook, and here's how the library relates to what you're doing right now and trying to learn. How are we handling niche marketing for undergrads, faculty, PhDs? I know when my son went to do his master's and then again to his PhD, 2 librarians at his institution phoned him and said, we're your personal librarians, come in for a meeting. And they supported him through his entire thing. A lot of universities are doing this niche marketing. What does that customer relationship kind of activity play out in an institution of higher learning when the most important thing, the 2 most important things you do are creating undergrads who have knowledge they didn't have before, and faculty and PhDs who are creating new knowledge? And then how is the user changing? And then how are they transforming over time? Because we know they're changing. They're more mobile. There's all sorts of things that are different on them. And how do we move to a place where we work together with our users to create library experiences, and that we have a couple of designed experiences based on our top questions? The age where we can be differentiated by the products and the price, our collections and free books, is over. If free was so important, well, you know, we've been free much longer than Google has. And we need to be very careful to understand that our value is in the experience and the transformational act of working with us virtually and physically. And all these Web 2.0 stuff, social media, Enterprise 2.0, conversational aspects, and that stuff is really important to how we move forward. And librarians play a vital role in building the critical connections between information, knowledge, and learning. And that's where the magic happens. So in your strategic planning, as you listen to the sessions over the next 3 days at the San Jose State University Web 2.012 conference, where are the opportunities in the magic space as opposed to just getting better at the operational space and doing things well? How do we build cafeterias, takeout, private dining rooms? Who are the private chefs, the name people? And how do we create a better variety in the strategies we're doing? And what are the components of our programs? We have the tools, just like IKEA gives us this. If IKEA model was used in General Motors, maybe they could have gotten out of the recession by delivering your car without all the pieces put together. And boy, you could bring the price down. But we don't want that. It's too hard to find information right now. How do we build experience portals that deliver the key experiences that are needed around genealogy, around research, and that we're not giving them all the pieces and making it hard? How do we make sure that we move beyond reading as fundamental and PC skills and searching into real literacy, what a number of librarians are calling transliteracy? At least it's a good umbrella name for a topic that we need to get better at changing who is there. How to know the difference between when one chooses a commercial search engine like Google and Bing with advertising-based algorithms to a professional search engine that is not influenced by racist organizations, political groups, commercial advertising in their algorithm, but one that matches the important questions that the end user is asking. How do we make sure that we understand what's happening in the 21st century in education? This is a picture of the webpage of the Info Ohio 21st Century Learning Commons that's teaching teachers what the library resources are that will improve every aspect of the classroom experience and from the student experience point of view, as well as teaching teachers what the opportunities are for improving their toolkit. and how do you build that network teacher and focus on it as a strategy. And there's a lot of research on 21st century that shows where the focuses are. And you'll notice that this is about skills and competencies and how one changes the dynamics of an individual, as opposed to just measuring a circulation transaction or a click on a website. And you know, we have these issues with consumer-based search that our society is at risk if people are falling into the trap of only using Google and Bing instead of knowing when the how and why questions, the important questions of life and the important decisions of life, need to be answered. We need to get better at our analytics. We need to stop seeing our users as just their book behaviors or just their clicks on our website, but really understand what their satisfaction levels are, what their goals are, what they're trying to do. And so that we know, we've got some research that Gale has shared over many years, and you can look at it, where we have customer satisfaction data on people using the databases, and we found some pretty surprising facts. Like, I always find it interesting that 35% of the people using our databases are there for the very first time. That's like newbies. And only 29% are finding our databases via the library website. The majority are finding it through teachers and professors and recommendations from friends. Looking at this, you can look at later. It's just the EduVentures research on investments in technology in the higher ed space. But 87% of students say online libraries and databases have the most significant impact on their overall learning. Many librarians believe something different than what the students are telling us. So looking at your objectives and measuring your strategy in the right way, in the right analytics, is an opportunity that the social media allows us to measure what's happening on the social space and not just the transactional space of whether a click or a thing has happened. And so we must look at changing library strategies beyond just digitization, putting a mouse on a book or whatever, be looking at the strategic challenges for reference and research work in the coming decade, and looking at the supporting behavior and how that's going to move to the how and why questions. Now that's research. The interview is more involved. It's transformational, not transactional. Expertise counts. The position and reputation of the delivery professional is true. I'm always appalled at the libraries that won't say their name, or librarians who won't say their name, or librarians who won't wear name badges, or people who use avatars or fake names. You know, I can't imagine another profession saying you can't know my name. Oh, I'm going to go to an anonymous doctor or an anonymous tax accountant or an anonymous lawyer. If we want to be respected for our expertise, we're just going to have to tell people our name and say that we're good at what we do, because our self-effacing nature is getting in the way of actually being successful. And what does it all mean? We've already moved to an article level universe. The digitization of nonfiction means we're moving to a chapter and paragraph user and recombining books on the fly with articles. It's going to change the nature of how we provide questions. And the book is going to have visuals and video and sound and speech, and integrated with social web, and integrated with interaction and interactivity that allows us to enhance the book in a very different way. Some of the new books that are coming out that have scores on them and play music as you read the fiction just blow me away. And so how are our strategies should change? Well, in summary, we need to look at evidence-based reference strategies. We need to look at experience-based portals, the new commons, the knowledge commons, the learning commons, the experience commons, not the information commons or the computer commons. Personal service on steroids, names, professions, rock star librarians. Quality strategies, consumer versus professional search. Where is the quality, and making sure they know that. Social networks and recommendations, especially in the fiction space. Stronger, more rugged transliteracy strategies that we work together as a profession on a national, international basis to create this stuff. Rather than hand knitting every freaking sweater, maybe we need to get to an industrial model on the important stuff so that we move a little faster. And then focus on our HR and libraries and look at people-driven strategies and dealing with cross-generational training around technology and the soft skills in balance. And looking at how we deal with the aligning ourselves with the research agenda and the curriculum agenda of our institutions. And so how do you strengthen your personal brand? How do you position the library and the librarian separately? And don't tie yourself directly to collections or space, but access and the expertise you offer in creating the magic. Network with your users socially, measure, don't just count, and analyze. Analyze what's going on and engage in partnerships. Take some risks. And consider the differences of the different kinds of common strategies and think long term. We can look at the strategies we're doing now and the experiments we're doing and saying, look at this baby, what a terrible accountant, let's throw it out. And you know, we know it takes some time to grow things up, and that kid that you see here is going to become an amazing adult. Some of the stuff we're building right now is baby steps. Let's understand it as baby steps and engage our critical thinking, not criticism, but critical thinking aiming at improvement. And let's look at, I'm just going to skip through a few here, and understand that we can market ourselves as smelly yellow water. And Chanel No. 5 is, what is this, $190 a bottle? And or we can market our sex appeal. And which one are people going to pay more money for and value more highly? You don't see Chanel No. 5 saying, oh, here, $190 a bottle for smelly yellow water. So let's get our marketing aimed at what we actually do and get our heads out of the stand. There are no knights on horses in the technology. We can't hide behind our computers or hide behind our books. We have to sit by the side of a river a very long time before a roast duck will fly into our mouth. And we have an opportunity right now to really, really align our strategies and take the technologies that we've learned. Not that we have 100% of people on it, that's not our goal, but take the technologies we've learned and realign our strategic plans in our libraries with what we really, really accomplish and the difference we make in the world and the difference we make with people and the magic that is librarianship. Thank you for listening today. And I don't know, Steve, if you want to do questions or if we need to leave some time for the next speaker to come in. These slides will be up on my blog shortly and in SlideShare. And thanks for listening. It's always a joy to do this.
Even if you want to take questions, we can do it. We have about 8 minutes left. So if you'd like to ask a question, you can raise your hand. That's the third icon over in the participant window. It's a hand icon. And we'll give you microphone privileges, and you can ask your question, or you can put your question in the chat.
And I'm seeing some stuff in the chat, some very nice comments. Thank you very much. How can you get others, administration, to catch the vision? That's a really good question. And I think it's around talking in person. Too many of us try to talk to administration, and especially in our funding groups, and we write reports and send them reports as if they read. Politicians don't read, they just don't. You have to go talk to them. And then you have to get people talking to them who are within their peer group. So how do you get endorsements and testimonials from professors and deans within the core group of people who talk to the provost? How do you build that group? And that there are strategies for doing that. That's part of the strategy of understanding how auditory learners and interpersonal learners actually adopt changes. And that kind of stuff is important. Another person here was saying, how do we spread the magic? And I think it's around storytelling. There's a wonderful book by Steve Denning called The Springboard Story, and you tell people stories. The patron's biggest problem is time, as the person noted in their question, and they don't have the time necessarily. So how do you align with their time requirements? And one of our challenges is a piece of research out of SLA said that librarians were too slow and that Google was fast. And so how do we work with people to move this along? I think it's around telling stories. And it's about spreading those stories on a viral way. So I'm okay with blog postings, Facebook postings, using the social media to spread the word, YouTube videos, and having the end users do it. I actually admire the Keep the Library campaign and some of the research on that and the requirement for Microsoft's funding that they had to do showed that they were having an impact, and the research is showing that they do.
Stephen, there was a question.
Sorry, Steve, did I hear a question was going to come in?
Yes, I apologize. I had to turn the speaker down from another session. So somewhat related, I think there was a question you passed over, flew by, which was, what role does digital storytelling play in the library and digital makerspaces?
Oh, I love the makerspace stuff. I was at we had, I think it was Grand Rapids or Steve Potter's library came in and talked about their relationship between the makerspace and their incubator in town. And they were putting librarians on site within the business incubator and showing people how to use the business resources to move their businesses forward. And then they started videotaping them. And people would say, oh, I started this muffin business, it outgrew my kitchen, it outgrew my garage, and now I'm using the incubator kitchens. And then the library showed me how to do market research, how to register my business, all this sort of stuff. And then, but it was an entrepreneur telling that story on the videos, and they had, quite a few of them. And it's the same thing with any program you're doing. How do you get people to tell the story? So we sent in a video crew from Gale into one of our clients using our career transitions product and started taking videos of people who had applied for jobs and gotten jobs from working with the librarians and the resources that were provided by the library, including our portal. It's far more believable, and then the word of mouth starts. So it starts to create that ripple effect that's so important. Sorry, there goes my cough. I think we're down to 3 minutes, Steve, and you probably need to move to the next person. If anyone wants to ask a question, there's my Stephen.Abram@Cengage.com or Stephen.Abram@gmail.com will get me, or you can ask a question on the comments on the Stephen's Lighthouse posting of this presentation as well. Thank you very much, everyone, and I'm happy to answer questions at any time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, everybody, for being here. The way this room works is that you all have to exit the room for the recording to process, but the recording of the session will be up within 5 minutes. So we do have another set of sessions that start in 2 minutes, so I hope you find something else that's of value to you. Thanks for attending. Thanks to Stephen again.